you can be a leader at whatever level. It's about that shaping, the influencing, the collaboration piece. If you've seen a leader showing that empathy and willingness to bring people on the journey, then that's the type of leader you want to become. Would it have changed me going for the role? Probably not, but it would have given me an idea of actually what I could be facing. That needs breaking, because, just because your manager doesn't mean to say that you should. There's always something you can look at and go, actually, could I do that differently? When things don't go so well, see it as a learning opportunity. Next time, if it comes up, you'll do it that way instead.
Hey, welcome to the Leaders Podcast with me, Laura McDonald, the leadership coach and mentor. Come with me as I explore the elements of leadership that give leaders like you the power and confidence to make the impact you know you can. I'll be sharing my own experiences, top tips and insights, and talking to some very special guests to share their thoughts and leadership experiences on mindset, influence, change and growth. So let's get right to it. Today, I'm so excited to speak with my accountability buddy, friend and fellow business owner, Kathryn Hall, the multi-award-winning career transformation coach and owner of the Career Owl. Welcome to the Leaders Podcast, Kathryn.
Thank you for having me today.
That's okay. We were introduced through a mutual connection for work purposes, but we instantly got on like a house on fire. So 3 years later, we're still supporting each other as accountability buddies, but really good friends as well. So that's awesome. Before we start, I have a question that I ask all of my guests, because serving ourselves so that we can serve others well is critical to effective leadership. But my guests all have different ways of doing that. So I'm on a mission to share all those ways far and wide. So my question is, what have you done to serve yourself in the last 24 hours?
I've listened to some podcasts. So to do that, I've also read, I constantly read articles and things as well, and use articles and things. So really to sort of help, my knowledge of not just what I do for a job, but also what's happening in the wider world. It then helps me to help my clients so that I understand what is actually going on in the world. So it's not just about writing your CV or anything like that. It's also around, well, what's happening in the business world? What are the challenges that could be faced, not just in the UK, but globally as well, that could have an impact on jobs in the future.
As I said, you're better known as the Career Owl. So share with everybody what it is that you do as the Career Owl.
So I help clients to develop their documents so it really, helps them to shine when they're going out to look for new roles. So whether that's their CV, cover letter, their LinkedIn profile, and then also help them with interview coaching as well. So, getting prepared to actually go and tell somebody in an interview, why them and why they should be offered the role. And also recently started doing some more career coaching as well. So really helping people to work a bit longer term with me. That kind of really helped to sort of grow and answer some of those questions that they might have around their career and things, and give them a safe space to talk to.
Absolutely. And your industry that you work in is like really vital anyway to people. I think the jobs market is so much more confusing than when, like, you and I first got our first jobs, or when our parents got their first jobs. And it's just to have that person to be able to go to and just have that guidance is so important now, because like you say, it's just, if you have to, as the expert, keep reading about this stuff and keep understanding what's happening in the world just so that you can help your clients, then your clients need all of that stuff too. And that, it's great when you have that central person that you can just go to and say, Kathryn, what's this? What's happening? How should I approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's understanding how they can transfer their skills to lots of different roles as well. So, clients that I work with don't necessarily want to stay in the same career pathway that they always have done. So, like you said about your parents' generation, my parents went in and they would have stayed in the job for 20, 30 years plus, where nowadays you can, move wherever, which obviously gives you variety. But then it's, well, how do you transfer that knowledge from that role to another and show, well, how can they then work well in that next career pathway? So it's And that's part of sort of what I do. And very much helping clients around that whole confidence and mindset piece as well, because sometimes they're, struggling to really articulate themselves. And that's why, with my support, they're then able to really articulate why then.
And like you say, go into that interview feeling like I can speak about me. I have the language to describe me and show you who I am, because that CV is just proof in the pudding, really, isn't it? That you're qualified or a suitable person for the job. Once you get into interview, it's a whole different ballgame. They're now thinking about, okay, so how would this person fit into our team? How would this person interact? What would they bring to the table? What's unique about them? And a lot of people don't have that language to speak about themselves in that way.
And I think it's and especially it's where people are moving perhaps from that, their very first career into that first management role, and then into sort of senior management and above. Well, actually, it's more around that whole leadership piece. Actually, how do you then articulate how you can operate more strategically rather than just doing the do as an operational person? And now, how do you move from that individual contributor piece to actually being much broader? And how can you really contribute then to the aims and objectives of the organisation, and also help to shape those as well?
As I said, we know each other quite well, so I know your story already. But how did you get here? Like, what was your journey to being the career owl?
I initially started off in retail management when I sort of left school, went to college, then into university. Did it part-time. When I finished that, went into a full-time role within retail management, loved it. It was, for me, started getting the commitment, so sort of 60, 70-hour week. But I learned so much about how to work with people and how to get the best out of people. So I wouldn't change that for the world. I know I'll talk about the hours and stuff, but, the customer relationship, you start building those relationships with the regular customers coming in. You got to know all the staff. I basically worked across every department, so I knew everything and anything about running a retail store. But there was something missing, and the bit I really liked was the people bit. So because I'd done a degree with HR, I thought, put feelers out. So I did, and I went and secured my first role working for a business that produced fruit machines and pool tables. Again, complete contrast to where I'd actually been in retail. And again, it was really fascinating work. I supported the head office from the HR side of things, and also their distribution centre where they actually were making the fruit machines and pool tables. So, for me, going in at, can't remember how old I was, 20 odd, going into that, I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I was a bit of a techie geek anyway. So for me, it was like, well, how do you do this? And then I moved on to adults children's wear. So I worked in with sort of, children's wear clothing, again, sort of supporting across the UK and Northern Ireland. So, a variety HR policies for, for the Isle of Man, which is a bit of a combination between two. So that was fascinating. And then I went and worked for a discount retailer, Store 21, which was great. And then I worked for DHL for a number of years, working across the UK. I was told it was the Midlands patch, pretty much was on the road sort of 5 days a week, supporting multi-site contracts, which is, I absolutely loved it. And I think I kind of really grew my HR knowledge in that, because every contract, because it was a third-party logistics provider, so you had to learn all the contracts. There were lots of different contractual terms and stuff. So absolutely loved all of that. And then moved into Central Co-op. So obviously one of the UK's largest independent cooperative stores. So again, sort of supported from, so I managed a team of HR administrators and also wrote the HR policies as well. So had a dual role within that. And then when I had my son, made the decision that, and that was my personal decision along with my husband, that, we didn't want to put him into nursery full time. So took a career break for a number of years. And then there was just something missing. Kind of got, after a few years, it was like, left being mummy, don't get me wrong, but I was just missing something. So a couple of friends were looking for new roles. And I said, oh, I can help you with that, because I've sort of supported people with CVs before in my HR role. So I thought, okay, well, let's try it. So I did. And they both secured interviews and they got the role as well. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I can do it. So the career I was born. So it's now 5.5 years old, and I've worked with over 600 clients since then across the UK and slightly wider as well. So just absolutely love what I do.
And having seen your work personally and worked with you several times, I can absolutely vouch for the fact that you do amazing things for your clients. So
It's about getting people's personality out, so, for every client. So I do calls with every client to really kind of get to the essence of who they are, because yes, the structure of a CV is standard, but it's about getting to know who they are and what they've done, and everybody's career pathways are different. So, and it's about getting that essence of it into their documents to say, here you go, recruiter, this is why you should employ this person.
I suppose the most crucial question for me is, I understand you started your business because obviously you, like you said, you helped a couple of people out. You knew that it was something you were good at, that you could support people with, and that's kind of how your business was built. But I know a lot of business owners that get, maybe a couple of years down the line and they sort of go, well, maybe this isn't the right thing for me to do. I'm going to change direction, or, make my business do something else, or just introduce additional services. And you've just kind of grown the way that you support people, and it's always been with this one thing. Like, I know initially it started out as, I'm good at it and I can make this work for me. It's a business. But why have you stuck with it all these years?
But I think there's a combination of things. One is getting the feedback from clients, when they've secured that next role. That's the little buzz for me of like, oh, actually, I've made a difference. And often they've applied for multiple number of roles before they worked with me, got really disheartened. And then when you hear that they've then submitted it and got an interview and got the job, you're like, oh, okay, that's the reinforcement I need. But I think as well is it's surrounding yourself with the right people. So, like we talked about at the beginning, you and I bounce things off you and go, isn't this a daft idea? Also have a fabulous business coach as well, who I can also bounce things off. And it's also having other people in my network as well. So like the BACVW, so the CV Association I'm on the board with. That again, it's having all those connections, and it's, building those networks. And, I always say this to clients as well when they're, talking about things, is build that network and keep building it. So don't just do it when you're looking for a job. Do it all the time, because you never know when one of those networks can help you with that direction or that direction. And that's the key bit.
Your career from start to finish has been quite varied, because you've led in so many different ways. You've had specific teams, for example, that report to you. That's an obvious way of people that you lead. But then there's other things, because of the departments that you've worked in and what they do. So things like HR, you're not just leading and managing your team, you're leading other people within the business, because obviously HR is the person that you usually call when you're sat doing a disciplinary, or when you're sat trying to recruit somebody, or when you're trying to write a job description, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. HR is always the point of call. So you're leading plenty of other people outside of your own team. But then in addition to that, becoming a business owner, you're now, especially with your type of business, you're leading your clients to help them to understand what it is that they want for themselves and how they're going to get there. Most people just sort of kind of do what I did and just sort of go through a career just leading teams, and usually it's just their team, and and then you go into a business and you're like, okay, I'm leading my clients and all the rest of it. But you've had, I think, a little bit more diversity in that your leadership had to stretch beyond your team. It had to stretch way beyond your team, because the departments that you worked in were responsible for keeping everybody in the organization safe and cooperative and collaborative and all the other things that HR do.
And I think as well is, I think that often people see leadership as being managing a team, through my experience, and even like knowing with what I do with clients, you can be a leader at whatever level. It's about that shaping, the influencing, the collaboration piece. And how do you do that? So you can articulate, because actually, when people recruit for roles, it isn't just thinking about the here and now. It's about also looking at the people that you're going to keep within the business. So how can you then grow that person in your business and keep them? Because you've got a cost of training and developing somebody. You never know, they could be your CEO in 10 years' time.
Everybody that walks into your business is the future of the business in some way. And like you say, you've got to understand how to retain that person to make sure that you get the most out of them, and actually that they're happy in that and that they're committed in that. And especially when they present signs of being that leader within the group, that they're able to step forward and say, yeah, I know how I lead. I know how I can contribute to this team through leadership. That's so important. But curiously, when I was writing my notes for this recording, I realized that despite our long-running relationship and the volume of time we spend together and the amount of discussions we've had about leadership, we've never actually had too much of a direct conversation about who you are as a leader.
It's very much about that collaborative, get them to bring them on the journey with me as well. And I think that's so important that, because people aren't going to necessarily know things straight away. So it's how can you bring the best? But it's also about then looking at the people you've got in the team and how you can bring them, recognizing where their strengths lie. So you might then be able to give them some responsibility in something.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think I've always had that, like the empathy and support side of things, which probably obviously works quite well in HR.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me to hear you say that. It doesn't surprise me that was the kind of leader you've become over the years. The job roles that you've chosen and the type of business that you run, I think, needs a lot of those qualities. You're flowing with these things, and it's true, you are. But I think sometimes we don't always see that in leaders, do we? Things like empathy and the ability to recognise what value everybody can bring to the table is often missed, and some people have a real talent for that.
And I think as well it's what people have learned from others. So if you've seen a leader showing that empathy and willingness to bring people on the journey, then that's the type of leader you want to become. If you see one that's very dictatorial and micromanaging and all the other stuff that goes with it, then you think that's the way that you should be a leader.
That's it. Which was kind of my next question.
All right.
No, it's all right. But this was kind of my next question, was like, how was your leadership shaped? Like, was there particular people that you had around you? Was there a certain person? Was there just general behavior? Like, what did you see around you that made you that leader?
I think it's just in general, as you sort of see people throughout your career and you kind of pick up on those, I don't want to be like that. Sort of back even, my original retail career, you see some managers who've clearly just been parachuted in that don't want to know what's already happened, but it's all about show for them. And for me, that wasn't the way I wanted to be. It was very much about keeping the people and the customers at the heart of everything we did, so that, people understood why we were doing certain things.
Definitely. I mean, the leaders around us often have a really heavy contribution in shaping who we are as a leader, whether it's something we take from them or something we say, no, I'm not doing that. No matter what it is, there are examples, especially when, so many leaders today still don't have any kind of training on leadership when they first start. Like, we're taught how to manage, and that's easily done because a lot of it is, task focused stuff, or we're taught how to manage very easily. But the only people we often have on leadership to look to are our own leaders. They have their own cycle and their way of doing things, and a lot of that's been passed down from leader to leader, and it's just an endless cycle, a ball of people just flowing one after the other of constant behaviors or traits or, ways of dealing with certain situations that just constantly continue. And it does turn into that cycle. It doesn't mean that all of it is stuff that we should reject. I know from experience, from my own personal experience, there was quite a lot that I rejected. What did you take from the cycles that you saw? What did you take forward and say, actually, I need to keep that?
there were the ones that communicated not just about what was happening day to day, but also like the wider business piece. They were the ones that, you kind of went, actually, that's the bit I want to keep, because actually people need to know, whatever level they're at, of actually, well, what's happening in the business and seeing how their role fits with that as well. Because I think, certainly with conversations I have with clients at more junior roles or early in their career, whichever one it is, that often they struggle to say, actually, this is what I've achieved, because they don't see it as being an achievement, because for them it's, well, I'm not in a position where I can influence things. But actually, if they didn't have you, they wouldn't have that initial first line support for customers. And to actually probably make a bigger deal than actually somebody more higher. Sounds a bit strange, but but I think again, it's really kind of making sure that everybody knows what's happening. And it's that, it's the communication piece. And also ones where it wasn't about, you haven't done this, you haven't done this, you haven't done this. It was doing the positive first, and then actually it's more development areas. So, it's not just, I'm going to whack you with a stick because you've done something wrong, but here's a carrot just in case. For me, it was bringing that within to say, actually, I want to bring people on the journey, but they also need to know where if they are doing something wrong, it's how can we overcome it? And it's, and that's where it's about building those strong relationships with your team and wider team as well.
Definitely. It's about constant development. I spoke about this with Nicole Weiner in my first guest episode. She said one thing that leaders everywhere could take from business owners like me, her, you, was the whole strengths versus weaknesses thing, and reframing it to strengths and space for development. And I thought that was so important to say, because I mean, I did that for my teams. It was constantly about development. I didn't want to focus on what somebody classed as a weakness. I think it's important for you to understand what you are naturally really not good at. I think that's really important to understand, because yes, you can reduce the impact of that by working on it, but there's a good chance it will never be a strength. But most weaknesses can be developed, so they're not really weaknesses. They're just simply areas where you haven't had enough practice, or areas where you don't have enough knowledge, or things like that. So it is important to reframe it to that developmental space thing, and just say to people you can.
Yeah, and it's interesting you saying that, because it's one of the things I say to clients when we do interview coaching sessions is around, if you ask the question about a weakness, reframe it to be, I don't see them as being weaknesses, I see them as development areas, and then pivot to that, because actually it's showing that, yes, there might be something that perhaps you're not so good at, but actually you're putting steps in to make them better. Again, it's about that reframing of your mind. So, and if that helps so you can flip your imposter gremlin across the room, brilliant. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, it's kind of a secret question really in interviews, isn't it? When somebody says, like, tell me about your weaknesses or something similar, the real question is, what are you doing about them? That's the real question. And I kind of wish that interviewers everywhere would just ask that question rather than what are your weaknesses, and just getting people to list all of this stuff. It's, if you want to know how somebody acts on something, ask the whole question rather than just the first half. I think that's, something that interviews everywhere would benefit from, because especially when you're conducting a lot of interviews at once, it's easy for managers to just ask that question, what your weakness is, and then just kind of, I don't know, almost forget about the fact that it's really a two-part question.
I tell you what's interesting recently was I read an article around John Lewis, because they actually give all their interview questions beforehand. I absolutely love it, because to me, it's not putting the pressure on the candidate. Because a number of times when I've done interview coaching, and you can see them and they're absolutely physically shaking, and it's like, oh, can't do this. And actually, if they'd had the questions beforehand, they'd know what you're expecting to answer, so you can prep it. Not over prep it, because if you sound, you sound like a stuck record when you try to over prep it. But then it gives people that safe space. And also, if you've got any diversities or anything. Again, it allows that, it's that supportive nature for that as well. So definitely something that every employer should do.
Someone I know had an interview recently and they asked for the questions in advance and they got them. I think it was 48 hours in advance. And the problem was that they had a 12-hour shift on the day in the middle and then were working for the first 5 hours of the morning of the interview. So they didn't really have that much chance to prep. And I think that was a lesson learned on their part. Like, if you know that you've got an interview, take the day before off. But having the questions in advance, I feel, gave them a lot more confidence to be able to say what they wanted to say more articulately than they would have done had they been given it at the last minute.
Absolutely. And an interview should be a two-way process. It's not just about you presenting yourself to the business. It's also then about the business, you finding out about the business and, knowing actually, do you fit in that business? Is it the right place for you? Will it help to grow your career in the way that you want to? Are they going to give you those opportunities and things? And I think, but that comes from being shaped with good leaders at the top who recognise that. And it's got to come from the top, because if it's trying to be pushed upwards, it's like pushing water up a hill, isn't it? If we use an analogy, it's got to be led from, that person sitting in the chief exec, managing director seat and cascading it down. This is what we're going to do. And it's that change of mindset. And that's what makes a great leader, is that changing of mindset. Just because we've done it like this for the last 25 years, doesn't mean we have to do that for the next 25 years, because the world is different.
Absolutely.
When you think 25 years back, and I'm not going to do my maths as to how old I was, but, but when you think about the use of technology, the use of, processing, how global the world has become, it's different, and actually we need to be more adaptable to that, and that's what our leaders need to do.
I think it was one of the things I admired most about the major corporate organizations that I worked for was that the leaders at the top were genuinely interested in people. And I know because I met both of them and several times. And, they had no problem whatsoever. In fact, they actively booked into their diaries on a regular basis time with people around the business. And that was everybody. They wanted people to know that, it's okay to introduce change, and actually I'm coming out to actively seek that directly from you. And that was the best thing, I think, that always came out of whenever I met them, was the fact that they always asked me for my ideas. They always asked my team for their ideas. And it didn't matter who you were, what your job title was, how long you'd been in the business. If you saw something that you thought would benefit other people, they were like, okay, I'll consider it. And they did.
Which then also helps the motivation levels for the team as well, doesn't it? Because actually they're seeing that things are happening as a result of, you said, we've actually done it.
Like I say, where you said about, it needed to come from the top down, that's the biggest thing that helps leaders break the cycle of the leader before, is when we are constantly in the mindset of, it's the one thing I think that everybody should share, is we have to keep changing. And you shouldn't change for the sake of change, but you should always recognize that change is necessary for everybody and everything within the business to move forward in any kind of way. It's got to move forward. It's the one thing that all leaders, no matter what level you are, no matter what type of leader you are, no matter whether you have a team or if you're just a person of influence, whatever you are, you all need to have that mindset of change has got to come. It's got to move you. It's got to move everyone around you. And as soon as you accept that, you don't just change things within the business, you also change things within yourself as a leader. And you recognize when things are serving you, when they're not serving you, when they're serving your team, when you're not serving your team. You get to see all of that. If you were to do your whole leadership journey again, would you change anything?
I think probably ask more questions at interview about what the dynamics of the team were before I walked in. So I remember one particular role where I was managing more than a small team, and actually there were challenges in the existing team, and I didn't know that until I walked in the building. Would it have changed me going for the role? Probably not. but it would have given me an idea of what I could be facing.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
But also spending then time with, with whoever it was that had managed the team before to see what was going on.
Was there any parts of the cycle of the leaders around you that you took and then went, oh God, I need to break this. I can't do that anymore?
Probably not working as many hours as a dish. Because just because your manager doesn't mean to say that you should also do it. I can now look back at it going, why did I do that? And that's in a couple of roles that I've done where, manager came in very early in the morning and left very late at night. And actually that needs breaking because, just because your manager doesn't mean to say that you should.
Do you know what? It was I think it was probably one of the most shocking moments of my life. I can't remember for the life of me who asked the question, but somebody one day a few years ago said to me, who asked you to do all these hours? And I realized looking back on, 16 years worth of a career, that while it was the culture, and yes, you are influenced, and of course, leaders around me in those spaces were doing exactly the same as what I was doing, nobody had ever actually told me to do it.
And it was almost that light bulb moment. And I remember you and I having subsequent conversations around, but actually it's our businesses, we shape it.
I think you might be right. I remember the other question she asked me was, what do you want your ideal working week to look like? And I remember specifically, I said 9 to 5, and she said, why? 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And she said, why? And I said, because I've never had it.
I think, it's interesting because it's one of the things I do with clients as well when I sort of talk with them about, so what are your non-negotiables, but really thinking about it of not, in an ideal, but think about it more in terms of an ideal situation. So, it's actually, well, what do you want your working pattern to be? So, actually it's those hours, but it's also about, do you want to be hybrid? Do you want to be remote? Do you want to be in an office? Where do you work best? Where do you thrive best? What type of environments do you work in? And yes, obviously there's the salary, there's the benefits, but all of that, do you want to be a line manager or do you not want to be a line manager? So again, it's getting really thinking about it because it's very easy when you are then looking for a role to almost, I kind of call, sometimes job boards, it's a bit like going down a rabbit warren and you never pop up. It could all pop up in the same place because it's so easy to get stuck down into it. So actually then let's have if you've got an idea, then it might help a little bit to stop some of that.
A lot of this, breaking the cycle thing comes back to self-awareness, doesn't it? It's about knowing your values, knowing what you want out of life, knowing what your vision is for yourself. It all comes back to some kind of self-awareness. And like you say, it's if you know that there's parts of the leadership cycle that you need to break, that will often come from, this doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like who I am. And I think that was probably my biggest saving grace, I think, when I first went into formal leadership positions, was the fact that my leaders taught me they had skills that I needed, and they had leadership styles that I needed to be really good at, but they made sure there was more than enough room for me to just be me.
Yeah.
And that was so important.
And that's what makes a good leader, giving people the space to work it out for themselves, as it's in that safe space and you can try things and you might not get it right first time, but you learn from it.
Being able to say to somebody, look, I broke the cycles around me. I'm telling you to break mine, being that person that just outright says it, because people don't. They just go with the flow. It's not enough, is it?
I think they can't break the cycle.
How does the work you do now help people break the cycle of leadership?
It gets some people to recognise what they've achieved within roles and actually where do they then see themselves going in terms of that experience and those achievements. How can you then go into that new business and make a difference? but in their own way. And it's giving them then that confidence and belief that they can go and do it, and they can go and shape things. Because ultimately, and a role is that, it's not just about if it, is that person a round hole to stick into a round peg to stick into a round hole? Is it actually, are they definitely going to be the right fit? And I think it's about how that people then articulate that. So they're clear in themselves about what they can do and what they can deliver, but also then the recruiter can see it too.
It's building that language, isn't it? Just to be able to say, this is, look, I've done this and I can say that and I'm confident that I can say it, that
I'm not just
you actually acknowledge
it
it.
looks good on my CV because I'm going to be able to get a job from it. And that's one of the things, I say to clients, I don't put anything in your document. If you haven't told me you've done it, I don't put it in. So personal values are very much about integrity and honesty. Say to clients, if I can't see it, then I'm not going to put it in, because that's then going against my personal values. And I wouldn't want to set them up for a fail.
You and I built a workshop together called Becoming a Visionary Leader. And we've purposely included things around breaking the cycles of previous leaders as part of that. And the workshop is aimed at new leaders or people just coming into leadership, So this information we're including is right at the very beginning of someone's formal leadership journey, but it's never too late to break that cycle, right?
No, definitely not. Because you've been, you could be a leader for 50 years, but you still should be learning. It's that continuous development. There's always something you can look at and go, actually, could I do that differently? Particularly in businesses where perhaps they are multi-generational. Again, it's that, seeing how, how things are. And I did a podcast episode recently on, multi-generational workforces, because it is so much that, businesses are different. You could have somebody at, who just left school, all the way up to somebody who's getting closer to retirement age, or even past, the default retirement age or statutory retirement age, but are still wanting to work, and anybody else in between. And it's about, how do you adapt your style to support all of them, not assuming that, your 16-year-old will be techie savvy, whereas your 60-year-old won't, because actually sometimes it's the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing I've really noticed about myself and about other leaders that I know well and have done for a long time, is that the fundamentals of who they are. So basic traits, like, for example, at my core, I'm a servant leader. I always have been. I've been that way my entire life. There's an abundance of evidence to say that that's who I am. But that doesn't mean that the way that I serve others doesn't change over time. There's plenty of things that I've done to, rebalance the way that I serve myself so I can serve other people. There's plenty of ways where I've said, okay, there's a limit to how much I can serve a particular type of person. For example, if they're not willing to put in the work or think that I'm going to do it all for them. Yeah, your fundamentals will always stay there. They'll always be there underlying you, but the way that you present that can always change over time. There's a limit as to how far I'm willing to go for you. And just because somebody else shares that foundational thing with you doesn't mean that you're going to do it exactly the same way. People look at these things very differently. My best friend is also a servant leader, to her own detriment. And but she's she's on a completely different journey to me.
And it's about really getting to know the people that you're being a leader to. How does that person want to learn? Is it by reading things? Is it by, talking it through? It's all of those things as well, and taking that all into account. When so not just assuming that everybody will be fine reading a 4-page email on something.
What's the message you'd send the first time leader in you now?
Take each day as it comes. Ask loads of questions. And when things don't go so well, don't think, oh God, that's it, I'm rubbish, can't do it ever again. See it as a learning opportunity and ask, so why did it not go right? What could I do differently? And stick that in your suite of tools. but next time if it comes up, you'll do it that way instead. Because I think ultimately go for it, because it's very easy to sit there and go, well, what if? Actually, it's no, go for it. And you know what? It might not work out, and you might decide that, leadership's not for you, and actually we're quite happy doing what you were doing before. That's fine. Pivot your career, go off in another direction. From everything we sort of talked about today, actually, career pathways aren't straight anymore. They are, they do go wiggly. They go in different directions, and you go into different sectors, you go into different job titles. It's all about building all that effectively toolbox within you, so that you can then go in and be whoever you want to be. There's no right or wrong way.
No.
But it's about, trusting in yourself, trusting in what you can do, but also surrounding yourself by that network that can help you.
You have built a fabulous business. You've created this world around you that's even changed the way I think about career moves now. If someone wanted your support, where would they find you?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. So I have a LinkedIn page, I have a website, I have a podcast. They can listen to me there if they want to first, see what I can suggest. So podcast has been listened to in all bar one continent now in the globe, which is just bizarre, but it's fascinating. And then if people want to book in, obviously I've got a Calendly link as well, so that they can sort of book in through there. So, which is great. And would love to have a chat with people to see how I can help them.
And I will put all of those links, including the one to mine and Kathryn's workshop, which is for both private and corporate clients, in the link for this, in the description for this episode. Kathryn does some incredible work, and that's been recognised by a lot of people and in a lot of ways. She will weave some amazing magic on your next career move. If you're thinking about making a change for yourself, or you need her support to find that dream career, go and check Kathryn out. She will give you all the support you need. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Kathryn. I hope you've enjoyed being a guest today.
I have. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been fabulous.
Thank you so much. It's been an insightful and empowering conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Until next time, everyone.